All right, well, welcome everybody to the infrared therapy webinar with Robbie Besner, founder of Therasage. I'm Dr. Scott Richmond, founder of Thrive Health. So welcome. We just had an amazing response and registration for this webinar. Initially, it turned out that it was just going to be for the clients that I work with directly, kind of really just getting answers to questions you may have, how to, if you already have infrared therapy that you use, how to just maximize that tool in your tool bag. And it turned out to be something, tonight that has just grown and been bigger. And we're really just going to dive into a lot of questions that were submitted ahead of time. If you do have any other questions, you can drop those into the Q&A. We will do our best to keep on time tonight and answer as many possible questions while we have Robbie, who I consider just a world leader in infrared. I've known him and used the products. Man, it's been roughly, I want to say about 7-8 years now, which we'll kind of get into a little bit, make this nice and fun and personal. But I just want to start off by introducing Robbie Besner as we get started here. He is the co-founder of Therasage. And he is the chief science officer and device developer for the company. And they are a premier infrared healing product company, recognized, as I mentioned, as a leader in the integrated infrared technology. He's always been an advocate for natural health, which is why we are joining forces tonight, because I am also. And he just brings a lot to the table in his expertise in this area, which is super important for us all, especially in these times. He graduated from Boston University in pre-med, engineering, psychology, and business. He went on to do his postgraduate work at Case Western Medical School, discovering natural healing and anti-aging effects of infrared frequencies. And he began developing these specialized devices and different applications for them. He's a professor for the World Federation of Asian Medicine Societies, annual contributor to the World Committee of Infrared, and a member of the education committee at the Hippocrates Health Institute, a presenter at medical integrative and anti-aging health conferences, podcast, best-selling author, and considered a leading scientist in the field of integrated infrared technology. So with that, Robbie, thank you so much for joining me tonight, being able to reach out to our group of clients and those that are just connected in so many ways. I feel like with all the changes that have happened with 2020, one thing that hasn't changed is my world and living virtually. And I work with clients all around the world. You were mentioning before we went live here that, you had people in Europe that it's like, man, it's in the middle of the night. How are we going to watch this webinar? Well, that's the beautiful thing about technology and how this all works. So thank you so much for joining us on a Wednesday night. It's a little later on the East Coast. I hope everybody, I want to just give a shout out to our veterans, for anybody that, has veterans in their family, or if you are a veteran yourself. We just love and appreciate you and want to give you a huge shout out. And in all the crazy times of right now, we can do our part and just say thank you. So thank you for being here. And Robbie, I want to start off by kind of just a little bit of background about how you got into this, really, like how it became your passion, your purpose behind it. Tell us a little bit about your personal story. And, you can go as deep with that as you'd like, because I think that's super important, especially with the people I work with, and how we even, came into contact and became friends. Robbie's traveled up here to Iowa from Florida, and actually been able to do a seminar with me in person, which was awesome, which doesn't always happen, and would be a little more challenging these days. That was a few years ago. But yeah, so just like I said, just share kind of where this began and how it developed into your passion and your purpose.
Well, first of all, let me just thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for having me on and giving me an opportunity to share some of my research and development with you, of course, and all of your followers. Yeah, I was reflecting before we got together tonight about the last time that I came to Iowa and I was with your group and met your family and your daughter, and we skipped through the parking lot together holding hands, and it was just, oh, it was like it was yesterday, honestly.
Yeah,
And it was way fun. So thank you for having me back and
absolutely.
giving me again this opportunity to just relate the technology that we're doing, the advancements, and to try to help all the viewers, all the followers that are with us tonight, to understand that there are real solutions to the challenges that we have in healthcare today, and they're not always as expensive or out of reach as you may think. And so part of my soul actually is doing these kinds of presentations with you, just to be able to relate like the latest and greatest things that are out there, and um, and also to kind of have my ear very close to the ground as to what people need and what they're feeling, and to share my life experience with them so that they don't feel so alone with their own journeys. So with that, let me just segue into how I sort of got started in this category. You mentioned some of my background stuff, but that we're dating back in the late 60s, early 70s when I started my formal education. And it wasn't until about almost 20, about 22 years ago, my oldest child, my daughter, contracted Lyme disease. I know it's a big category because we shared so many hours of discussions on that. And one of the things I really appreciated about our friendship, both professionally and personally, was being able to share those innovations with you as I was discovering them, just so that you could integrate it into your practice, and you could enjoy that journey with me.
Yeah, and let's not forget for me personally too, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah. Well,
that started
that
with me
was
also.
your information to share, but
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
it was part of my joy was to actually every time I had a discovery, there was basically two or three people that I went to right away and said, get onto this one because we're getting some real results in what we're doing in the lab, and of course with my daughter. Um, so so she basically got sick with Lyme, chronic Lyme, and 20 some years ago, Lyme was sort of in its infancy with respect to the amount of Lyme literate doctors that were out there and available for people with Lyme to be able to get some kind of result. And having a pre-med background, it kind of made me think about the not just our family situation, but just the whole dynamic in general. And for us, many of the handful of Lyme literate doctors that we were using were out of state. So we're in South Florida. I had to fly up to New York every 4 to 6 weeks with my daughter. So there was that expense. There was the expense of the medications, and then managing sort of a remote relationship. So these days, we're learning more about virtual doctors and being able to work remote. But 20 some odd years ago, that wasn't really a common effect. So, so we had to have a local practitioner here in Florida that basically took the orders from the remote practitioner that was a specialist in Lyme. And there were only a handful at that time. So it occurred to me, and many of us out there can probably relate to this, that, you know, we're somewhat alone with our chronic challenges when you have a health challenge. You have your relationship with your primary doctor, but what do you see them maybe once a week or once a month, or in our case with my daughter, it was the protocols were every 6 weeks. And so the rest of the time, 99.9% of the time, you're managing your own healthcare within your family unit and support unit. So we were a little fortunate. We had means, so we were able to pay for the healthcare. None of it was covered by insurance, so that was one part of it. But the other part made me think about what were my daughter's main symptoms, and what kinds of things could tools and devices and systems I could surround myself with that were basically home based, that we could manage ourselves in, and or she could manage in order for her to really manage her own health challenges. And that's really was sort of the underpinnings of the genesis of our business. So when I looked at Julia's um, her symptoms, she had cognitive challenges. She was experiencing body pain and joint pain, and she was experiencing what I considered very high levels of toxicity and inflammation. And so when I sort of broke all that down, I got centered on toxicity, and I started to study and research the most efficient ways to lower toxicity or to detox. And that's when I discovered the healing rays of infrared frequencies, and that wavelength, when it comes inside the body, it basically mobilizes all the toxins inside of you. And so that was a major breakthrough discovery for me. But what it did was what happens in the software business and in the device development business, Dr. Scott. You discover this thing, you open up one door, you think you've arrived, and then you realize when you step through the door, there's 5 more doors behind it. And so it really was the beginning of the journey. At that time, again, 20 some odd years ago, the infrared technology wasn't really mainstream, meaning that people couldn't really get it and it wasn't available to buy and purchase in their home. And if it was, you wouldn't really sort of know how to do it. It was mostly used by sports medicine doctors to help players heal faster, lower their pain thresholds, get back on the field, along with other things, you know. And so I went to China. I saw 63 factories over a 3-week period, and started to work and develop devices mostly just for our use, home use. And what happened was started getting results. Some of the doctors that Julia was seeing saw the results and started to ask us if we could develop these devices for them, for their Lyme patients, to start to distribute. And really, that was sort of the beginning. We didn't have a business plan. We didn't go to venture capital. We didn't raise all this money. They didn't have some of these group funding things that they have these days. Then we're self-funded. My wife and I have done this ourselves all these years, and we're very invested in everything that we do. So that was the beginning, and it's just been an incredible journey. There's some economic gains in the things we're doing, but the philanthropic gain of helping someone go from being incapacitated to getting on their feet, and you know this because you live this every day, is way, way, way more significant than any dollar amount you could ever put to that. That smile, that joy when they're getting their lives back, it's terrific. So I'm very grateful for all of that.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, and that's, you know, that's what drives you. That's what drives me. You know, I was the patient also, and the doctor and the patient. And so that's why it was super important for me to do the same, which is how do I help myself at home? Because I was traveling out of state, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I had to find a way to keep healing sustainable.
Right.
And that's really, you know, a really big point that I try to make with clients is to equip ourselves with, you know, the best possible devices that we can use that are going to get the best results, but yet keep it simple and efficient, things that work. And that's really what tonight started off with, which is just, hey, you know, gather some of the clientele together and let's, you know, if you have any questions about infrared, let's deeper dive into it. And then, you know, we spread the message, and it just, you know, we've got almost 100 people right now live with us, and it's just amazing. And that's the purpose behind all of this. And that's what drives us, you know, some of these late nights. And you're a developer, so I'm sure you wake up in the middle of the night going, hey, I got a great idea. And, you know, you got to start to work on it. And, you know, I'm always kind of the same way with whether it's, you know, supplemental products, protocol things, different challenges with different cases. And it's a moving target, right? And it's super important to be able to find products and devices such as Therasage that we have used and trust. And that's, you know, I'm very particular on that. And I put my face in front of something that I truly believe in. And if I don't, or if there's any question, I won't do that. You know, even just today, I've been working hard. I've kind of been digging into a little outdoor time in the woods. It was kind of nasty and cold and rainy yesterday, and I just wasn't feeling so great. I was just running myself down, and what did I do? I bundled up. I laid on my infrared pad for probably an hour or so, and I immediately just felt better. And here I am later tonight, and we're rocking and rolling. So these are solutions for the everyday individual, but we are definitely, I know, talking to many people that are dealing with challenges such as what you were expressing with Julia, and the clientele that I work with, whether it's Lyme, mold illness, other chronic infections, co-infections, any other autoimmune challenges. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And we'll definitely get to some of those when it comes to the Q&A time at the end here, because that a lot of the questions were kind of stemming around various conditions per se. And I want to say, infrared literally can be applied for anybody, which is the beautiful part. I want, and so when I say keep it simple, it's like, yeah, it's good for everybody, despite what you're dealing with. So, all right, well, let's just kind of go down, some of the talking points when it comes to the science, because that, hopefully that will answer some questions along the way too. Because as you know, and I know, just like in the supplement world and herbal world that we use, and I put together protocols with, there are many, many, many companies out there that people can compare and say, well, but I can get a sauna over here for 300, or I can have this little gemstone over here that does this infrared or grounding or whatever it may be. And so, just walk us through the science and just your knowledge, and even maybe some of your like discovery along the way of what you've done and putting into very affordable solutions that in many ways I believe are better and improved, and yet maybe people don't necessarily know about them. But like I said, let's deeper dive into the science and full spectrum infrared and the effects that it has on the human body. And most importantly, what I'm most concerned with, you brought up toxicity, is the cellular level. And that's true, where true detox really occurs, and how infrared can really, really, benefit us in that nature.
Okay, and we have 3 days for this webinar tonight.
Yeah, no. So
okay.
give us just the diamonds of your normal talk.
Okay. First off, I need to take the mystery out of infrared in general, understanding where it comes from. And so these are natural wavelengths that come from the sun. They're responsible for heating 82% of the Earth. Albert Einstein in the 40s did a thesis on understanding thermal effects of sun rays on the planet, and basically came up with some Joule statements about infrared being the healthiest wavelengths of all sun rays, and also that without the infrared spectrum, there basically wouldn't be life on the planet as we know it today. That's the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom. And so that's how paramount these frequencies are. They are considered the healing frequencies of sunlight, and they're broken down into 3 wavelengths: the near frequencies, the middle frequencies, and the far frequencies. And why that's important, particularly in today's world, because many of us have access to internet, and you can Google, and you Google infrared, or you Google infrared sauna, let's say, and then all of a sudden you get a whole bunch of readouts and a rage between the near saunas and the far saunas and all that stuff. And I believe that it's important that people see that, but it also can be pretty overwhelming. And that's another real reason why I love being here tonight, to try to take the mystery out and the questions out of that people might have out there. And so, when you're healthy, Scott, you sort of feel like you've got all the time in the world to discover things. But you and I both have lived in the chronic world, like both personally and also with people that we've treated in practice. When you've developed any kind of condition that goes beyond a year, or starts to become your new normal, that's your chronic condition. you don't really have all the time in the world. You're feeling yucky. You're basically sick of feeling sick. And then you get overwhelmed when you go on the internet with all these choices. Which direction should I go? And it's kind of important that you and I unite and get together and are able to impart this information to sort of cut through all of the noise in a way and put it out there. So um, so the infrared frequencies aren't the ones that tan your skin and potentially could give you skin cancer. In fact, just the opposite. If you overdose or you get too much of the UV frequencies, which can alter your DNA and RNA and genetic codes, um, it all in nature it all gets healed by the infrared frequency wavelengths. And so, to give you an example, there's a relationship between the sun and the earth. That's called the azimuth, that direction. And as the earth is turning during the day, that the amount of frequencies that come to the earth's surface, they go along the full spectrum, meaning they start with the UV spectrums in the late morning, early afternoon, and then they start to weigh down, and then the infrared spectrum starts to come in as the earth is turning. And so in nature, if we turn back the clock to the days of Buddha, Jesus, and Moses, and probably some other, demigods, all those guys that we look up to, we were living in caves. We were living on the land. We were living in tents. We were nomads, and essentially. And so we were out hunting and foresting and planting, and we were out all day in the sun. So we were getting overexposed to UV, but we were also getting an ample amount of infrared to heal all the potential damage that you could have gotten from the overexposure. So that's how important the infrared spectrum is in the scope of things. Now, breaking it down even further, we've got the near, middle, and far, and each of those wavelengths basically do something to our physiology. And you're going to hear me talk about the pillars of Therasage and part of the principles, underlying foundational principles. And so as a research scientist, I study ancient cultures of what kinds of health medicinal aspects were used by different cultures all over the world in the history of the world that worked. And then I also study nature to see what the dynamic is. And then I study that against or contrast that against our physiology. And I employ as many of those kinds of core primal influences in everything that we do at our company. And so, different than other infrared companies, I'm not a salesman. I am the inventor, and co-founder. And so I take the direction of our technology any way that it serves me and basically the population, how I perceive the change in healthcare and the needs, the urgencies. And I try to incorporate in my technology solutions, real solutions. And so part of my core principle, it goes back to my own personal experience. You talked about a few $100,000. We were spending $30,000 a month sometimes on my daughters between travel, doctors, medications. And so understanding that and also realizing and being passionate about the people out there that might be listening that have family members or maybe even themselves that have chronic challenges, we purposely keep our prices extremely low, a little bit above our cost, honestly, so that we can deliver it. We have enough money to put back into our company for research, but that we're not sort of gouging or taking advantage of the fact that some people have health challenges and they're desperate, and they'll spend their last penny on something that'll give their family member or themselves relief from their chronic challenge. And so part of what we do is keep the prices low for that. Back to the pillars. So we take what's called a full spectrum approach. And so what that means is, like I mentioned, there's near, middle, and far. And if you Googled infrared sauna category today, you'd see a lot of stuff on far infrared saunas, and a lot of stuff now in the last 5 years, even more popular, are the near frequency saunas. We've taken sort of nature's playbook, and all of our technology is what's called full spectrum, which means that we actually have all of those three wavelengths, and in the same proportion that the sun delivers that to the earth, or what we have every day in nature, until about 2 years ago. And then we changed our little formula. And the reason why we did that was mostly out of response to a few things. I've been teaching for 15 years at Hippocrates Health Institute here in West Palm Beach. And I have a particular venue or room that I love because it's homey. You can sit on the floor, on the couches. It's just a group of people communicating. And in that room is a full mural of Hippocrates. And I've been staring at this mural for the last 15 years. Every 3 weeks, I go and I teach. And so I was looking at it, it started to bother me. And you know, one of Hippocrates's sayings is that food is your medicine. And then I started to dwell on that. And I thought, you know, that might have been so 200 years ago, but it isn't so today. Like if you could go to and I'm not saying this, first off, whatever I say tonight, I don't come from a place of judgment. And so I'm just trying to communicate real information for all the viewers to just make their own minds up what's right or wrong for them, and always use yourself and us and my team as a resource if there's more questions beyond even what we can cover tonight. And so I'm looking at this mural of Hippocrates, Scott, and I thought to myself, you know, I could drive to go fill up my car with gas, go inside, buy a Twinkie that has a shelf life of 500 years. Okay. And I said, that's not Hippocrates. That's not the food of his day. When I grew up, my grandmother grew up on Long Island in New York, and she used to take me by my hand when I was 4 or 5 years old. We go to the market every day. Her refrigerator was called a Frigidaire, and it had an ice block on the top. That was the refrigeration process. There weren't leftovers. We ate fresh food every day. Okay, and it made me think that the world is not the same world, meaning the toxicity, the climate, the chemtrails, the GMOs, the glyphosates that's in our atmosphere, food and water that we're consuming these days. These all have these chemicals um, have real biological effects on our bodies, and I think that's part of the reason that some of the trends in chronic healthcare, diabetes, Lyme disease, chronic fatigue, like all the big ones, you know, heart disease and so forth. I think that the environment is contributing to that. You know, in a formal word, it's sort of called epigenetics, where you've got your own genetics and then you have the overlay of the environment and how that affects your genetics. And then again, how it presents itself as a symptom per se, or just in your normal body function. And so I changed my formula, and particularly in the saunas where we started, we actually started dialing a little bit more near frequencies into the formula because of what they do. So let's go into that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Because that was the next area is why is this so important for detoxification of all the things that you mentioned? So you already went there, which was good, and that's what I deal with a lot. And like you said, the near infrared and that change that you made is so important. And you know, I talk about more the role of toxins than what the condition is, because you don't have those conditions if you don't have toxicity burden. And so detoxification has kind of become a dirty word for over all the years. And that's why at the very beginning I said cellular detoxification. Like, yes, we want to deal with, you know, systemic, you know, things that are circulating. We want to get things moving, but we also got to get what's trapped inside the cells, inside that tissue and inside that organ out safely. And infrared plays a huge part in that. But before we go right into this role of infrared and detoxification, one big key component, and I don't want to steer your thunder on the near infrared, but when we start taking on and working with clients that have, you know, kind of been everywhere, done everything, or didn't tolerate, you know, we'll use Lyme or mold type of protocols, and you go through the detox crash and you don't tolerate it very well. Well, one of the big talking points that I stress all the time is that the order matters. The toxins matter. But before we ever attempt to go into, you know, detox, we have to build up cellular energy. We have to have better functioning mitochondria and ATP production to, you know, to the best of your ability before you ever start really pushing your body beyond what it's normally naturally able to do on its own, which is what we now call detoxing. We want to focus on that energy because we have to bring our cellular energy up, and then we start to bring that cellular toxic burden down. How many people out there listening right now have tried to do it this way, and we get stuck, we crash. And when you don't see results, what do most people do? They quit, they give up. It's hopeless. And we talk to so many people on the daily that's been the experience. And I hope that message is loud and clear, that the order matters and we do things differently for a reason. And so that's why I'm so happy that you started to focus, hey, how can we make this even greater? Which now I want you to jump into the detox side of it. But I wanted to make sure that everybody heard that key point, that cellular energy has to come before detoxification to truly be as efficient as possible, and make it the most tolerable way possible, going through the process. So
Wow, we're so on the same page with all of this. I believe, and we've discussed this before, that we get sick on a cell level and we heal on a cell level.
yeah,
And if you don't fuel the engine, which is your ATP, ADP, and that mitochondria, if you don't give your body the resources to fuel, how do you expect to actually do anything efficiently?
yeah,
And that's really down to the cell level. And my to finish my thought about the near frequencies, I'm keen on near, but really we've taken what's called a full spectrum approach, which is the way nature delivers it. All I've done is identified that the world of today, the toxic way that our bodies are expressing, interpreting the toxic world that we're living in, what I felt needed to be addressed was actually dialing in or enhancing the near part of my full spectrum approach or portfolio of frequencies, my cocktail, um, to enhance that mitochondrial challenge that people are experiencing. And we see it everywhere. Also,
yeah,
um, our autonomic nervous system is broken into the sympathetic and parasympathetic, which is basically sympathetic is your fight and flight when you're real anxious, and your parasympathetic is when you're calm. What we studied and noticed in clinic was that if we can shift you from being anxious and unsettled to a calm state, then the body is much more akin to receiving the full benefits of whatever modality, therapy, and intervention that you might do. And so, we're talking about things, but everything we're talking about is you get from bringing infrared frequencies, this spectrum of sunlight into your body. That's how important and primal this is. Um, I often, in part of my teaching, I talk about that, there's this condition called SADS, which is basically a deprivation of sun energy. And it happens during the winter. And of course, you're in one of those colder states, if I remember.
yeah.
So I would always admire you and your ability to withstand that, because my blood's thinned out living in Florida for a bunch of years now. So when I get into the cold weather, it affects me in a way I never really
Yeah,
expected.
we literally had about a 40 degree temperature drop throughout the night before and
Wow.
yesterday, 30-mile-an-hour winds. So it
Yeah.
was cold.
Yeah. So we dress up with layers of clothes. We're like, Michelin men walking around like that. But mostly we're covering our skin surface,
Yeah,
and that's our skin is a photoreceptor that receives the sunlight and allows us to get all the benefits of the sunlight. So as we move into the winter time, there's actually a withdrawal of that sunlight, natural sunlight coming into your body. So dialing back a bunch of years before this whole thing got started, even before my kids came into the picture, I lived in Chicagoland area, and it's very cold there too. And I would remember it started to get cold around November, Thanksgiving time. And by January, I was jumping out of my skin. I just needed to like get somewhere warm. And that's the sense that you get from that withdrawal from natural sunlight and warmth. And so it took me from November to January, so basically 3 and a half months, to actually feel that emotionally. People get depressed when they went through all that stuff from that withdrawal. And then I would take my wife and I would go down to Florida. That's where my wife is from. And we bring our kids when they came into the picture. And I would remember I had this routine. We would rent a little hotel room that was somewhere near the beach. And so again, 3.5 months to start feeling the effects of withdrawal. I get on the plane, I get to Florida, I go to my hotel room, I put on my bathing suit, I run down to the beach. And in, I think, less than 30 seconds, just putting my toe in the sand, that all that feeling went away. Okay, 3.5 months to withdraw, and 1 minute to get empowered again from the power and the healing of sunlight and sun rays. That's what we're talking about. That's how impactful the work that I'm doing and the stuff that we bring to the devices that we bring to the marketplace and the education and clinical trials and all the things that we're doing. That's how important this is to in terms of awareness. So
Yeah.
um, so my newest spin is to just add a little more near into the normal playbook that nature gives us to really address the times we're living in now, the toxic world that we're living in now.
Yeah.
And I feel it's almost my responsibility to do that, having the knowledge and not incorporating it into the technology that, and I have the means and I have the ability and I have the brain and I have the fortitude, unwavering fortitude to do this is it's my passion, it's my bliss. So
That's
so
awesome.
that's my piece about that in full spectrum. And if you want to, we can talk a little bit about the attributes of each of the different frequencies, if that's important.
Yeah, let's jump to that here in a second. I do want to jump over to a question real quick is how can you build up and energize cells first if they're overloaded with toxins? And that comes to just as you know, you mentioned Hippocrates, you know, food, let thy food be thy medicine. First off, it's nutrients, minerals, amino acids, you've got oxygen, iodine, selenium, things like that. We use very specific methods to nurture the cells. It doesn't mean that you know they're optimized at that time because they are still toxic. But what we're doing is we're starting to load the system with your car with the gas instead of just at first it is pouring the gas on top of the car, but as you start to go through the process, more gas gets in the gasoline tank, your energy goes up, your cells start to work more efficiently. Now you start the true detoxification process. So where does infrared fit into this? At the very beginning. If you are somebody that's like, hey, I've figured out what I'm dealing with, or maybe you are still working on that, but you're at the very beginning of this journey. That's why this webinar tonight and this topic is so important, because this is especially the near infrared that, Robbie, and I do want you to break down the different frequencies, far, mid, and near. But that's why this technology is so important at the very beginning, because it's gentle. It helps you feel better. I never have somebody like really, and there's reasons why somebody may not feel as good after a session, but we also have the tools and we have a lot of the understanding of why that would may be. And we'll talk about, how we apply this, and your best practices for someone dealing, with chronic illness. And, so those were, some of the questions that we got, not to jump ahead, but that's the biggest thing is if you're not providing the body with the gas, the nutrients to begin with, that's why we struggle. So it's not so much that we're trying to truly get more energy production. We want it to start to work more efficiently because their cells have more to work with. And then you can start to, I always say we are what we absorb, not what we eat, take, or drink, right? So that's really what that question is about is if my body is so toxic and I can't absorb, how am I going to upregulate my mitochondrial function? So it's really it's an overlap is really what we're trying to do. And I talk about this in the hormone world. You can't fix hormone. You can't balance hormones if you don't remove toxins. But we can give things to the body to help support the process while you go through the journey. And that's how you quote unquote fix the problem. And you gotta heal the cells And that's how you start to strip away these conditions and labels, which I'm not a big fan of diagnoses to begin with. It doesn't matter what you're dealing with. That's what makes this technology so amazing. So Robbie, as you mentioned, let's break down the frequencies and kind of like where those are targeting, and the benefits of each one of them a little bit deeper.
Okay, you struck a chord. I'm going to go there and keep pulling me over there because I have a tendency to go off the road
Yeah,
from
it's
time
all
to
good.
time. Okay, so you talked about fueling the tank. I talk about the letters of the alphabet. You can't make a word if you don't have letters.
Yeah.
And so each of the nutrients, trace minerals, electrolytes, proteins, and all the things, there's trillions of processes that happen every day that we don't think about. They happen automatically in order for us to just be able to get up and open our eyes and take a breath. It's truly amazing, all of that. One of the things that's unique about infrared, I was actually going to cover this a little later in the discussion, but I think it's important now because we're sort of dancing around or focusing on cellular cleansing or cellular health in a way, is the role that water plays in the body. So there's a pretty famous research scientist named Dr. Gerald Pollack. He wrote a book 6 or 7 years ago called The Fourth Phase of Water. And he discovered in clinic that there are frequencies in the infrared spectrum that will organize structure of the water inside of your body. So why is that important? Because basically, if you drink enough water during the day, and that varies from person to person, you could be 72% or 74% hydrated. Your brain is about 81% made of water, and your cells are 98% water. So you need to have structured water, which comes from light energy. The light structures the water inside of us. And so you need structured water in order for the cells to communicate, for the cell to get nutrients and minerals and so forth into the cell, and for the cell to get waste products out. That's the whole methylation process, right? And so absent structured water, the cell can't function properly. And so even taking supplements without having structured water, you won't absorb. It's called potentiating. You won't potentiate that or absorb, upload that nutrient in a way that is bioavailable for the cell for it to function properly. And it's still a story about infrared and sunlight. Absent sunlight, our bodies can't possibly do that right. And so, like I made a small analogy earlier, it doesn't take a whole lot of sunlight for us to do this. That's how amazingly efficient that process is. But it is important to have it, to
Yeah,
know that
what
you
do
need
we
to
all
have it.
heard, right? It's 30 minutes a day. It's full body exposure. That's not that long.
No, no,
But
no.
how many people actually focus on doing that?
Well, if I was asking you, and that's where we start in the sauna in our protocols, we ask for you to commit 30 minutes a day. And the reason why that is it takes about 8 minutes to get enough resonant frequency, the full spectrum frequency in your body to create what's called a bioresonant, which is just a vibration, to actually start that physiological change. That's on the average size adult person. So 30 minutes is really reduces down to about 22 minutes of real therapy. And if I ask you to donate or contribute 30 minutes of a day to get all of the health benefits that we're about to talk about, it just doesn't add up. There's no, in my mind, there isn't a reason why everyone that's listening, everyone in the country shouldn't be thinking about how they could bring these natural energies that are affordable in devices, and or if you are lucky enough to be able to get out in the sunlight, live in a southern state or something where there's still ample amount of sunlight, then you can just do it sort of naturally. The reason why we develop devices is simply to make it easier for us to integrate them into our lifestyles. Everyone's busy. I mean, I know it's a different world now with COVID, but eventually that's going to unwind. And so COVID or no COVID, 30 minutes a day is basically all you need to fight off all the toxins in the world, to get your body back on track, and to get you what you need to pull out the toxins that our body's storing that we accumulate through the water, food, and air that we're breathing these days.
Yeah, and just a little side note for anybody that has middle school to high school children, even college, reading Pollock's book for science class should be a must in our school systems. I actually have it. It's usually my every once in a while I'll pick it up because it's more like a textbook, but I'll drink my coffee over it, and it is. It's just amazing, and that's why I say, you know what, start with hydration, and structured water does that, and that propels every single other thing that you're going to do when it comes to restoring your health or keeping your health. And so I think, Robbie, thank you so much for bringing that up. But that's a water is a whole nother huge topic,
Of course.
but it is the fuel, because of what it does, and the science that he goes into is just it's brilliant, and it's very enlightening and intriguing. But like you said, it's connected to this infrared technology and how it all works. So break down the frequencies real quick, just so that kind of get some in depth, but not kind of keep it surface level of understanding of the different frequencies.
Okay, so there's the near, middle, and far frequencies. The middle is sort of a little bit of near and a little bit of far, and so most people are just focusing on near and far. The far, if you date back 25 years or so, all the research science on infrared really was about far frequencies. It really wasn't until maybe the last 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 years at most, that the near frequencies became studied a little bit more deeper in what they do, and because of that, there are device developers that have come up with devices that are just near. And if you go on their websites or you read their stuff, they're going to say that you only need near and it's the only thing going, and it's the beeswax or something like that. Um, and then the far, there's mostly the research on far. And so the wooden saunas and things that you see are mostly far frequencies. And the reason why that is because they're the deeper wavelengths that penetrate maybe somewhere between 2 to 3 inches into the body, depending on your body makeup. Like that's called BMI, like your ratio of muscle to fat to tissue and so forth. And so the more dense the more dense the person is, then the penetration, may not be as much as 3 inches, but over time, the full body is the whole body that gets it. Um, the near frequencies produce a transient gas. The body makes three transient gases. One of them is called nitric oxide. There's the guy who studied, won a Nobel Prize for discovering nitric oxide and what it does to the body. I am actually very close friends with Dr. Nathan Bryan, who studied under he was the protege of the Nobel Prize winner. And so he's now considered one of the world authorities. Dr. Bryan is considered one of the world authorities. And nitric oxide, it's a gas that basically creates what's called vasodilation of the smaller vessels, your capillaries and so forth. Vasodilation is just an expansion of a vein or an artery. And what that means is that it just allows your blood flow to happen in a much less encumbered way. And so when people talk about increasing metabolic rate, like you go to the gym and you get on a treadmill, that's getting your heart pumping and it's getting your blood pumping a little bit better. That's increasing your metabolism. Well, nitric oxide is being produced by the body naturally when you're doing those athletic events or burst training or anything like that. So your body produces nitric oxide naturally. But also what happens is as you get older, and I think that it's somewhere around in the mid-20s, you actually start making less nitric oxide. So your body's ability to make that transient gas goes down. So why is that so important? Well, the expansion of your veins and arteries is important on a capillary or a small vessel level, as well as the big level. Infrared frequencies do the same thing, and how that the near frequencies will produce nitric oxide, okay? But also the frequencies, they penetrate through the body seamlessly because they harmonize at the same frequency as the water inside of you, okay? So Dr. Scott, underneath your skin, there's a very thin layer of fat, and that fat basically insulates the body from extreme cold or extreme heat, right? You layer up when you go out in the wintertime, and that's the same thing that happens in your body on the inside. Well, that fat is mostly made up of water. And as we talked about earlier, this is basically Dr. Pollock's discoveries that the infrared frequency of sunlight will actually bioresonate and pierce through, or it harmonizes at the same frequency as the water inside the fat. So it seamlessly comes into the body and it starts resonating in your muscle tissue and your organ tissue. Those areas are very vascular. When that bioresonance occurs, that vibration, it liberates warmth. It, it warms up the vessels, they dilate. The near frequencies produce nitric oxide, the vessels dilate. These things are natural events and they create better blood flow. Your blood carries nutrition, healing properties, and oxygen. These are all the major healing, primal healing systems that bring our bodies back. And also, just as a sidebar, many of the parasites, microbes, even some cancers, they act what's called anaerobic. They starve the body from oxygen. They need very little oxygen in order for them to thrive. In fact, if you give them oxygen, they start to die off naturally. They don't like it. So if you improve circulation, if you improve nitric oxide in levels in your body, you're improving blood flow, you're improving oxygenation, and you're basically creating a platform for healing because most pathogens can't thrive in a highly oxygenated, blood oxygenated environment. So nitric oxide increases it. What it does for your blood, your hemoglobin, is it actually triggers the receptor sites on your blood cell to grab more oxygen when you make it available. So, so here it is. Near frequencies produce nitric oxide naturally. It also, they also go right into the cell and they act as a way. Now, this is not a nutrient, it's actually a wavelength, but that energy, that sun energy will actually activate ATP and ADP, which is the foundational components of a mitochondrial fuel. And so this is your powerhouse of your cell, okay? And you can give it nutrients and like coal, and or you can give it power from another way, and this is the sun energy. And both of them together is an incredibly great combination. But if all you did was just bring these infrared frequencies, particularly the near, into your skin, through your skin, into your cells, you're going to get more energy. It's just as simple as that. A few other things that near frequencies do is basically anything skin related. They're the skin surface to around 3 centimeters deep. And so if you've got challenges with, let's say, eczema or psoriasis, anything skin related, if you've had a surgery and you've got a wound that needs to heal, the near frequencies will help promote that healing. And so those are basically most of the sort of global benefits of the near frequencies. Now we'll skip to far. Far are the deeper wavelengths, and so they're going 2 to 3 inches. Now we're talking about major organs and major muscle groups and major veins and major arteries, contributing to a majority of what increases your metabolic rate when they actually study that, or they give you an analysis of your metabolism. And so, which is really kind of back to the reason why I like to incorporate full spectrum or all of these frequencies, because there's something in these wavelengths for everyone. Okay, it's not one versus the other. It's basically all of them, which is again nature's playbook. And so far would be pain relief, major circulation, major oxygenation. These are the big things. Oh, I did forget. There's an anti-aging for the near. There's collagen. It produces natural collagen. And so as you get older, you make less collagen. So that's important. Anyway, so the combination of the near and the far, I believe, is really kind of the way to go. You will get something from both of them. And so not to poo-poo the near devices and or the far devices, we've just taken sort of a holistic full spectrum approach in our delivery of this technology. But again, I do believe that there's something in this for everyone out there. And so it's affordable. It comes in different formats, and we can discover a little bit of that tonight.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's a pretty good overview.
All right. Well, that's awesome. Yeah. So, you kind of actually answered some of the questions that were submitted ahead of time, as far as even vasodilation, circulation, those that may have chronic heart failure types of issues, blockages in arteries, different things like that. It's super important, and it calms the system. It calms that smooth muscle. Plus, you mentioned, just even the pain relief, lymphatic flow, which,
Right.
many clients, and that's what we're dealing with is poor lymphatic flow and the inflammation that, systemic inflammation that, all of these different things lead to, that whether it's the toxins or whether it's an infection, a microbe. You mentioned parasites. One thing that you haven't mentioned yet, and neither have I, is even heavy metals. So how can how can we use this, these different therapies? You mentioned water, structured water is super important. Energy. We've got the calming effects of the infrared, and the ability of the cells. I've always talked about cellular congestion. They need to be able to breathe, and they need water, and they need that energy to do so. And so therefore things need to be able to move in and things need to be able to move out. And the problem is a lot of the technology not that long ago, from a nutrient or supplement standard, is we could get it in, but it didn't have enough energy. It didn't have enough electron ability to get out. And so things, good in concept, poor in delivery of results, just because we didn't understand how important that energy is. And that's why this is such an amazing tool to start with, no matter what you're dealing with, because as you mentioned, with these different frequencies, they do it all. And it's in its natural form, and very, very, very cost effective. And that's the reason why I use mine very frequently still, all these days, years later. So, like I said, there some of the questions that we're going to cover at the end, you've already gone through, which I knew you probably would, because you've probably done this talk a few thousand times, just like this topic I do too, and you can talk all day long. So uh, let's talk a little bit about specifically the sauna. I know that has really been upgraded. Talk just real quick about what you've done to deliver more of that near infrared, and then also I know you've been working really hard with the infrared pads and redesign and things like that. And over these last few years, I mean, I think it's really important for everybody to understand too, the industry, the FDA, the different things that have been going on with that, not to go too deep in it, but just the hard work in bringing Therasage to where it is today, and why that's important, I think is really good for everybody to hear.
Well, man, this again, you always make me feel like I have to go back a step before we go forward and answer the current question. And so, yes, all of our devices are considered or classified as class 2 medical devices with FDA, which basically means that, and it's really because for the most part, as a company, we took the medical model approach, meaning that I spend time with you, Dr. Scott. We talk back and forth. I share my research with you. I show you the attributes, and then you kind of figure out how it fits in your practice and with your demographic. And then you pair up, hopefully, my technology with some other protocols that you feel are most beneficial for your patients. And so if I teach you and you understand that well, and your flow of practice is 10,000 patients a year, then in my mind, I'm touching 10,000 lives. And for me, that's a really great way to leverage my research and development and education, as opposed to taking out ads or Facebook pay-per-clicks. And I mean, there's a lot of modern things, and I'm not saying that stuff's not good for getting the word out, but I just always enjoyed the relationship with the practitioner, because they get it, and they're on the front line every day. And so, yeah, so in order to, in good conscience, actually our standards at our company are higher than FDA standards and the things that we're doing. But at the very least, FDA globally is considered the queen jewel of credentialing when it comes to devices, because you have to go through third-party evaluations. It's a whole process. Our first device took us almost 3.5 years before we were able to get the notification of its credential. And so you can only imagine about how much money and time that's exhausting going into this discovery. And many of our competition, they are not going through all of that credentialing. Some devices don't need to be credentialed, but because for me it's important, if you're representing us, and like what you said earlier was so important, your name is on the line. You're making a referral, your license is on the line, and so you better be darn sure that you believe in what you're suggesting to to your patient. And and again, it makes it easier for you knowing that the FDA, a government agency, actually has opined and reviewed everything that we've done in order for us to be able to distribute. So it's one of the reasons why.
And not to jump in here real quick, but we are in unprecedented times right now in the natural healthcare world. And that's one reason why I kind of wanted to bring that up with the FDA, is because natural healthcare websites, practitioners, social media, it's being censored. The information out there is being attacked, and it is super important. And that's a whole nother tangent, but it is really important that you've made right and gone through the rigorous process over the last few years. And I mean, I know what that was like, just in private conversations with you of what you were dealing with. But here we are. And I think that's really important for everybody to know and to trust that, once again, that's what makes Therasage stand out. And there's many ways, but just from the technology, the science, and the credentialing, it's super important that you can stand behind what you've created.
Yeah, everything we do is evidence-based.
Yeah.
That means that we've gone deep into the research and to make sure that what it does, it does what it says it does. But I think some of our secret sauce, if you don't mind me diving in a little deeper, is the combination of things. Like you said so many important things earlier, Scott, about the order that you do things is so important in order for you to get an optimal result. And the way that you dose what you do is also super important in order for you to get a real result. And it takes someone like yourself that has had their own journey with all these variables to really understand the intricacies of that. It's not just looking at what's on a label, it's understanding how to integrate that particular intervention or suggestion protocol, in a sense, in order for it to actually serve the needs of the symptoms and of the patient that's in front of you. And that's true talent. And unfortunately, in the healthcare world these days, it's become impersonal. And so people don't necessarily, practitioners don't necessarily have the time or inclination to sort of take that extra step like someone like yourself does. And my hat has always been off to you for that, because sometimes you get famous and you sort of forget your roots, and you've never forgotten where you came from. It's a reminder every day when you shave or you look in the mirror, it's the same old Scott. And that's something that's super important for people to know.
I mean, my background's a chiropractor. It's the science, the philosophy, and the art. And that's one thing that I definitely stress to those that I talk to is anybody can just take some supplements, look at a label. Hey, I heard this, I read that, I listened to a summit or a podcast, and take a product. But what you're getting at is what it's the art. How do you take all of these pieces and put them together masterfully into an art piece?
Right.
Because we're so heavy on the science, but the bottom line is that not everybody's the same, but our physiology, our genetics haven't changed that much. And so what has changed? And so we've learned so much. And that's my role is, yes, I have my doctorate, but I consult, I coach through the challenges, and it's bringing the piece of the art. I'm not the most smart, like scientific textbook guy. I don't like biochemistry. I had to go through it, but that's just not my thing. It's the art. And I was taught that in chiropractic school, because there's more to it than just the what and delivery of it. It's putting it together. And that's really what you're talking about. So, and I certainly appreciate that, because there's so much out there, there. And we want to bring clarity and understanding and take out that confusion. And you led with that tonight. Take out the confusion of this technology. because it doesn't have to be so daunting and overwhelming, especially when you're not feeling well and you're sick, or maybe
Yeah,
it's a family member and you're like, I don't even know how to help them. You know,
sure.
we want to fast forward the process because you're right. You know, there was a day where I'm like, I didn't know how many days I had left, and I was, you know, I'm young,
Right.
and so we can't take that for granted ever. So brief us real quickly on the upgrade with the near that you've done here, you know, that not that long ago with the sauna specifically.
Okay, so we have a portable infrared sauna format, and we kind of like that format for a few reasons, and we've discussed this in the past. Your head is out. It's a soft format. We started off years ago, like 20 plus years ago, making wooden saunas, and we still make a really good wooden sauna. Um, but when we started making that as a device developer, I have particular intentions in mind when I make something, and then I'm a real active listener. And so when we started making the wooden saunas, what I heard was, Robbie, I really need the sauna, but I can afford what, you know, the whatever I need to buy, I can afford it. I live on Park Avenue, but I live in a 700 square foot apartment that probably costs $1 million.
All right.
And so I don't have the space. I need the sauna, but I don't have the space. So that was one thing that I heard. The other thing I heard was, well, I know I live out in the country. I have a big house. I got a basement, got plenty of room, but I really can't afford a three, four, $5,000 wooden sauna, which is the better ones cost something like that.
Yeah.
So the other thing I heard was I need it, but I can't afford it. And that's really was the sort of underpinning of the development of that format, the portable sauna format. So it's like a little fabric tent format. So then, you know, diving a little bit deeper, so now we've got something that's around $1,000 and or less. And it's space saving, meaning that you can fold it up and put it in a closet or under the bed. It uses regular 110 current, so you don't need an electrician to come in to rewire your house or your fuse box and any of that. And it's also portable, meaning you can, you know, it's comes in its own little carrying case. And so if you were traveling away for the weekend, or some people, I mean, we have very affluent clients that buy multiple of them, buy multiple uh, portable saunas, and they have them in their various homes, or they throw it in the back of their SUV and they take it with them when they go away on the weekend. We even have, Scott, I have doctors and we have customers that live in RVs, and they put the portable sauna in their RV and they call us up. What size generator do I need in order for me to drive this thing? You know?
Yeah.
So I mean, I just love the
Yeah, so
ingenuity.
no excuses. Like that is crunching space. And that's
Yeah,
one that is definitely a big one. And I want to mention clinically of why the design, and because you heard some of the challenges and things that people were dealing with, and I hear the same thing. But clinically, hey, I just don't tolerate heat very well.
right.
And having my head in, or way I'm claustrophobic or whatever it may be, this solves that. And I've not had one client over all of these years not be able to be successful in building up their tolerance and utilizing it and getting all the same benefits as when they thought they were super limited. And so that's just kudos to you of recognizing, you know, the demand and developing things that, you know, meet those demands.
Yeah, and we don't come from a place of scarcity or ego. You know, I'm not so smart and I'm not so great that I can't listen to what our brothers and sisters really need in their lives, you know?
Yeah.
And so those were the two of the top four reasons. Those were the two reasons that we get feedback and why we went to this portable format. Having your head out, you know, gives you the view of the room or the landscape of wherever you have it placed in your home, so you're not feeling closed in. We have an oversized cabin, and so we've had people. I've had a ball player that was 6'7" get inside that sauna. He said, "There's no way I'll be able to get in there." And we've had MMA guys, like these wrestlers and martial art guys, there, Scott, this one guy that got in the sauna, first off, he looked at it, he says, there's no way I'll get in there. His neck was thicker than my thigh. Okay. So I've never seen someone that muscle bound in my life. He got in that. He goes, I can't believe that there's like, I don't feel confined at all. And so that's one. Having your head out is an advantage. Like you talked about heat, your brain is actually, and brain cell is much more sensitive to heat than your body. And one of the most effective ways to fight off that your body naturally fights off an invader like a virus or a bacteria or a parasite, something that's foreign to your chemistry, is by raising your core temperature or creating what's called a fever. So being in the sauna, those vibrations of the sunlight, the infrared full spectrum, they cause a bioresonance, a vibration inside of you. It liberates heat and it raises your core up. Now, there's a it's been proven that around 101.5 to 102 degrees Fahrenheit, when you have a core temperature or a fever of 102, it creates a die-off. Most bacteria and viruses cannot live above that temperature.
And because we did get the question, and it might be the elephant in the room, does that include COVID?
Of course it does. But I'm not suggesting it by any means that this is the be all ends answer for that. But it is something that will support a healthy immune system. And so that's really a bigger title than COVID itself.
Absolutely.
It's like, how can I give you the building blocks and a foundation to give you what you need from a primal health point of view to fight off COVID, influenza, and anything that's thrown at you.
Yeah.
So that just happens to be the big topic of the day, and truly it struck so many of our families that we've been working tirelessly, Scott, honestly, these days, just to be able to manage all the needs of the people that are out there. And I'm so grateful that I can do that. So having your head out gives me the ability to actually hit your body hard, raise your body core temperature without affecting your brain temperature, because your brain is at 74 degrees or whatever you have your room temperature at. The other was other reasons. Pretty famous biological dentist, Dr. Jerry Curatola. He's actually got a practice in Park Avenue in New York, and he's like the Dr. Oz of dentistry. He's got a radio show and a TV show and all that. So when he saw that sauna, he went crazy. He said, "Oh my God, we've got many patients that and you have patients and customers that still have the dental amalgams in their mouths. And what happens when you heat up metal is it expands, and then when it cools off, it contracts. And with mercury in particular, during that process, which would happen in a regular, let's say a regular full cabin type sauna, you'd heat up those amalgams, there's actually off-gassing of that mercury gas. And so earlier you talked about detoxing and also the effects of heavy metals. Infrared frequencies and infrared sauna is one of the most natural ways to detox from heavy metals. And the way it does it is really interesting. Metals have an ionic charge, like a magnet, and it actually has the opposite charge of your body, of your tissues and your body. And so when infrared frequencies come into the body, this area of natural light, it creates that bioresonance, that vibration. That vibration breaks the covalent bond between the heavy metal and the tissue where it's stored. So now the metal separates, it goes into the bloodstream, and it's primed, or your body is primed to actually get these metals out. That's why the infrared sauna is so great for getting heavy metals out. And I know we're going to go there a little later on in our discussion if we have time, but I'm bringing it out right now because it's not just enough to use the sauna to mobilize toxins. You have to use the binders, and many of the ones that you suggest, to actually act as a sponge to soak up these toxins that we're liberating to help the body get them out.
And it's a long process. So if anybody right now that's listening or even that I'm currently working with, this is why it's so important to not just use binders, chelators, things like that, but to use this technology because it has such a broad reaching health benefit, but specifically around heavy metals with what you're saying, it's a must. From a clinical standpoint, in my eyes, it is a must to pair the protocol and the infrared therapy when you're dealing with heavy metal toxicity.
Yeah. And so the binders that I know you suggest, some of them, one of them has a zeolite, which is it's a silica. It's like a powder that's very commonly found on the planet. The ones I love, the ones that you recommend, they've got an ionic charge, and you brought that up earlier. That's a super important thing, and we can cover that too if we have time tonight. But what's nice about the ones you recommend is that they're laboratory tested. And so what happens in nature when the silica or the zeolite is in the earth, and it's a very, very common material, earth material, is it binds with because it's got a charge like a little magnet, it binds with the metals that are in the ground around the area where it's being farmed. Yeah. And so if you're taking a zeolite, its main purpose is to be a little stronger magnet than your body's charge, so that when you liberate the metal, it gets attracted to the binder rather than going back to being re-toxed or redistributed to the tissue. Now we've got a bigger little magnet in your body. The metal goes to that, and then your body can expunge, sweat it out, pee it out, poop it out. You get it out. So absent the binder, absent the laboratory tested, zeolite that doesn't have a metal already attached to it, which is so critical, you've got the formula. Basically, that combination right there is what they say in Texas, the chicken winner dinner. So,
and not to spoil no surprise, but this is going to be our next webinar, actually, special guest with the founder of the company, in which we've done other webinars with, but just as a follow-up to infrared therapy, which is now how to maximize your detoxification efforts, and really deep dive into that topic again also with Clayton. So yeah.
Excellent. I can't wait to hear that. So, okay, so the metal part is big, and the ionic charge part is really big because our bodies basically, we're more positively charged these days, particularly if you live in an urban environment. And that has to do with just modern creature features like heat and air conditioning, and the light bulbs that we use. They generate a positive charged particle. That's called a cat ion. And when you're going from your heated home to your heated garage to your heated office and back again, those air handlers actually influence your body so that you actually have more of a positive charge. And then the offset to that would be the earth charge, which is a negative charge, right? And so that's the ionic charge that you're talking about. Yeah. When you take supplements that have an ionic charge to them, that's the same charge as the earth, it potentiates and absorbs into your tissues and your body and your cell at a much, much higher rate. So that's a key, and it's another reason why I love the stuff that you do and the supplements that you suggest, because they all have those core elements in them. Yeah. And so we
didn't always know that. I mean, this is some newer technology over the last 3, 5, 7 years or so, but really finally coming out, available, and really knowing the science and why it has been game changers for sure.
So another core principle in our saunas is that we actually bring the earth charge into the sauna tent. We create what's called like an earthing effect. So the earth has a negative charge, the body has a positive charge. The goal is to create a neutral charge in the cell, because all of our cells are like little batteries. They have a positive and a negative, and when there's more positive and negative, then there's less cell communication. It's just like we talked about before. This is all about cell health, right? On a primal, you can't get any, that's the beginning and the genesis of the story and the end of the story. It's all about cell health, okay? So So that charge is just as important as giving your body the alphabet or the fuel, the cell that it needs in order for it to operate on an optimal level.
Yeah.
And so what we do is two things. We electrically ground all of our technology. So we're tapping into the grounding part of your electrical socket that you plug our device into. And we also pepper the inside of the sauna and healing pads and other type of technology with different kinds of gemstones. And those gemstones also generate what's called a negative ion. And that negative ion neutralizes the positive charge particle, and then we get that neutral effect in the battery. And again, we're positioning the body for an optimal health or the great health and wellness platform. So
Awesome.
that's sort of the core pillar behind that.
Robbie, bring me up to speed as far as the infrared pads. I know you've been working a lot on that. You had some come online. Where do we stand on the infrared pads and the different sizes right now?
Okay, so we've redesigned. We're kind of like BMW. Every 7 years, we redesign things. So we have just gone through the redesign of the sauna with the tri-light system, that special red light system that we put in. And now we've gone to the redesign of the healing pad, where we've created like a waterproof, water-resistant, hermetically sealed element inside. We also use natural jade and gemstones on the pads. They come in different sizes, the mini, the small, the medium, and the large full body one. And we also have one that we call the perfect pad that doesn't use jade stone. It uses natural tourmaline stone to generate those negative ions. All of them will be available. Well, let me see. The first two that we're bringing in will be the mini and the small. So they're going to be coming online within the next few weeks. They're kind of on their way here. By the way, we've shifted our model where we're starting to develop and assemble all of our devices here in the US. And that's been kind of a challenge for us because we were manufacturing overseas. And with this whole COVID thing, it got very difficult to bring many of the materials that we use to manufacture our stuff here to the States for us to come online completely. So we are in the midst of doing that. And our goal would be probably mid 2021 to have all of our products assembled and made here in the US. And so that's a big goal of ours. It makes it easier for us to deliver them to the patients and also meet the needs of America and the healthcare community.
And so many years in the making.
Oh yeah, there's strategic planning going on everywhere. Yeah. We've got 5-year plans, 3-year plans, 1-year plans, what I'm going to plan to do tomorrow. And so yeah, it's quite a process, and I'm just I don't know, I'm just grateful to have the opportunity.
It's about time I upgrade. I've been using my sauna now all of these years, and that just speaks to the durability. And the one thing I will say is, which has not happened very often, but when it does, if there's ever an issue, Robbie, you guys have taken care of people, and you know, we certainly appreciate that, and they you know, definitely appreciate it, and you know, they follow up with me and let me know, hey, I was taken care of, and I got a new sauna. For those that have gone through mold issues, fire, you know, out in the West Coast, you name it, we've dealt with it, and you guys have just been there, and you know, the biggest thing is you just do the right thing by taking care of people that are in need.
As a company, we don't believe, well, we do believe that it's just not enough to deliver a great device. We need to work on how to integrate that device into their lives with the proper protocol so they actually get the benefit. And yeah, that's where the art form comes in that you mentioned earlier. It's super important that we do that so that we deliver a full experience to all of our customers.